But I think really Salesforce changed when they stopped being a CRM and started becoming customer success and everything else that came with. So that brought in the marketing side, the data side, the analytics, and the idea that Salesforce can now do everything instead of just being a core CRM. And I think that's what's changed the most. I think that's where all the skill sets now required to manage, maintain, and develop the software has become more complex.
This is Salesforce Ben Insider, the podcast that brings you all the top Salesforce news, insights, and trends, completely unfiltered. Join me, Ben McCarthy, and some great special guests as we dive into the Salesforce discussions you won't hear anywhere else.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to SF Ben Insider, where we talk about ecosystem trends and news, and generally things going on that you won't hear anywhere else. And today we have a very special guest. We have Jess Oliver. Welcome to the show.
Thanks, Ben. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, our pleasure. Thank you very much. So we're going to be having quite an interesting session today. We're going to be talking about kind of how Salesforce has changed over the last decade, because we both started our careers about 10, 12 years ago. But before we dive into that, let's dive into a bit about something you've done recently, which is pretty amazing.
Yes, I don't go anywhere without plugging this nowadays. I've actually made this my whole personality for the past 4 years. So I've recently completed a row across the Pacific Ocean from Monterey Bay to Hawaii. So it was a 2,800 mile row. My teammate Charlotte Harris and I did this. We raised money for homelessness. We rowed the Atlantic in 2021 and broke the world record doing that. And we just thought, why not just try and do another one and see how much further we can push it? So yeah, rowed from Monterey Bay to Hawaii. Very, very tough. So I don't know whether I'll be doing it again. We'll see.
That is insane. So, and you said, how many hours do you row?
So
and then how many do you?
On the Atlantic, we did 2 hours on, 2 hours off. So it was 12 hours a day, kind of pushing that a bit more during the end. But the Pacific was a completely different game. We had such strong competition. The weather, the storms, everything was so horrendous that we just had to keep rowing. So I think by the end of it, we were doing 16 to 20 hours a day. And we were barely sleeping. We just wanted to win so badly. So an incredible.
And you did win.
We did win. We absolutely won. Yeah, we got the world record again. We beat the men's world record too.
Really?
Yeah,
wow.
we did.
That is insane.
So I hope it just sticks, this world record, because I really don't want to go back and do it again. Like, I feel like I've ticked a box there.
Yeah, amazing. Well, massive congratulations.
Thank
you for being here. So to get started, because we both started Salesforce similar time, we'll talk a bit about our career paths and how we started. So give us a bit of insight into, what your first role was and how you kind of evolved your career after that.
I think my story is a tale as old as time with this kind of thing. And you heard it a lot back in the day as, oh, I joined a company fresh out of uni. They had Salesforce. No one was really managing it. So I just taught myself how to develop it or how to configure it.
Accidental admin,
100%. And that was my story. I did a science degree at uni. I joined a pharmaceutical company. I had no business working in tech. And they had Salesforce. They actually had 2 Salesforce orgs, one for the medical side of the business and one for the veterinary side of the business. And I started configuring just simple stuff on the medical side and then having to go to the veterinary side to do the same. So brought the 2 orgs together and then started pushing the boundaries and moving it into R&D, into other areas of the business. And so, yes, accidental admin, but wearing all of the different hats, project manager, BA, training, user support, everything. And then that kind of just developed throughout my career. I then went and joined a consultancy. It was BrightGen, it's now Credera. That was a brilliant place to work. I think working in consultancy brings a lot of structure to how you approach things. But definitely at the beginning, it was a deep end, jump in, see what happens. Same as you, I think.
Yeah, I let's say exaggerated my experiences to land my first Salesforce admin role. And I did land it. And I worked out, it was basically like a support desk kind of role. So I had Zendesk and people would send in issues and I was like panicking on my first day because I had about 3 months of Salesforce experience and admin cert. And I was just looking through this.
Pure professional by that point.
Yeah. And I was just logging into this inbox going, oh God, can I do any of this? And it was kind of stuff like, I need the export reports permission. I can do that. Or I need this field. So it was quite basic stuff. And I did quite well. It was 120 user org, sales and service cloud, some Apex.
Right. Okay. So it was a customer that you were working for within their one org.
Well, I was the admin.
Yes. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So one org. Yeah. So it was fairly straightforward. And yeah, a bit of Apex from a developer that implemented it, and I worked with an outsourced developer as well. But it was fairly straightforward. Where I really fell down was anything that required like requirements gathering, or because I didn't really do requirements gathering, I just listened to what they wanted.
Yeah, but that's what we did at the beginning, isn't it? You kind of, and that's where the accidental admin comes into it, especially when you start with an end user and you don't really know what at the beginning the process is of gathering requirements, putting them into user stories, creating a backlog, getting acceptance criteria. You just hear what they want and you go, oh, okay, yeah, no, I know how to do that. And it's almost exciting that you know how to do it, and therefore you do it.
Yeah.
But obviously when the org is simple, that's kind of fine because you can backtrack and move things around quite quickly. But nowadays it's getting a lot more complicated.
Yeah, and it's probably a bit of misalignment from what the business thinks they need versus what they actually need. Because I think even when I started blogging, like I knew what an admin should be. They should be this all singing, all dancing, requirements gathering, project management, technical superstar that can do everything. But in reality, what they hired me for was like someone who knew Salesforce technically to dig around a bit. But actually the system was way more important than that. And they probably needed someone different, but they didn't know that at the time.
Got us.
It was us,
Unfortunately.
So you've worked as an end user, then went to consultancy.
Yes. So I worked as an admin for an end user, and then, admin, project manager, all the stuff that everything you do as an accidental admin. And then I left and I went back to university, I did a master's degree. And then I joined a consultancy. And actually what was really exciting about that is I had some good experience as being an admin, and I was able to work across the business in lots of different areas. But it was only on Sales and Service Cloud, just teetering into Service Cloud because we were starting to bring that in. But then when I went to consultancy, there was two things that I thought were brilliant about that. One is learning from people the correct structure for design, for requirements gathering, for implementation, turning around to the customer and going, actually, that's not realistic. Maybe you want this, and the demos and everything that comes with that. And then the other thing was being able to work with lots of different customers on lots of different projects with lots of different clouds. I think that's what consultancy brought me, which I think was brilliant. So yeah, my first job allowed me to be a little bit of everything, jack of all trades, jump into the deep end, and then consultancy kind of consolidated that learning. So
my question was going to be, what role, if any, you think was pivotal in your career? But you might have just answered that.
I tell you what's interesting. I don't think it's any one specific role, because I feel like I've done a lot and they've all been really interesting. And I think where I am now, it's a benefit because I've tried everything before. I know how to pull it all together into a project and to oversee it. But it was more people that I would think would be pivotal. That idea of mentorship.
Yeah.
So in my first company, there was a lady called Chanel McCoy. She was my first boss and she was amazing. I really looked up to her. And she was like that mentorship via osmosis. And then in BrightGen, similar, I had my boss was called Jim Llewellyn. He was a really, really sound, logical guy, and the way he approached things was very, very methodical. So I learned a lot through him as well. And now I'm working for a company as a contractor called Aways, and my boss is a lady called Lucy Auckland, and she's brilliant. So it's the mentorship you get within these different roles, within these different companies, that I think is almost as important, if not more important, than the actual role itself.
Yeah, 100%. I think some of the mentors that I've had have kind of shaped the direction my career went in, actually. Because at some point I stopped being technical and went into more commercial, like pre-sales selling and stuff like that. And it's because my mentor was the CEO of the company who was doing that role himself. So it's interesting how it can kind of shape
you also, when you're in an office or in a company, you kind of gravitate naturally towards people who you want to learn from. And then that's kind of what shapes the next step. So yeah, Chanel, she was really entrepreneurial, and I really gravitated towards that because that's what I wanted to do. So she wasn't technical. She doesn't have a tech background. I love the tech side of things. I'm glad that I can do it, and I'm glad that I understand it, but it's the entrepreneurial side of things and the commercial side of things that I found really interesting as well. So you don't necessarily always need a mentor in the role that you're wanting to do. It's maybe sometimes where you want to go as well.
Yeah, no, very true. So going back onto the topic of our conversation then, so we want to speak about how Salesforce has changed. And, we were speaking before the podcast, and it has changed a hell of a lot, like both in its kind of product set and complexity and the skills that you need to run an implementation. But just give us a summary kind of in your experience. How has Salesforce changed since, 10 years ago, 12 years ago?
But I think it's a good place to start from 10 years ago. Obviously, it was when we started. We were able to jump into an org, a simple org with Sales Cloud or Service Cloud, and kind of just get going and teach ourselves. And that was fine back then. We probably made some mistakes, but it was fine.
Wasn't too dangerous.
It wasn't too dangerous, but I think really Salesforce changed when they stopped being a CRM and started becoming customer success and everything else that came with. So that brought in the marketing side, the data side, the analytics, and the idea that Salesforce can now do everything instead of just being a core CRM. And I think that's what's changed the most. I think that's where all the skill sets now required to manage, maintain, and develop the software has become more complex.
Yeah, no, that makes total sense because, I mean, it's we all love Salesforce and it's a great strategy on the face of it. And I mean, well, not even on the face of it, it is a great strategy to be able to have this customer 360. You're plugging in all these different solutions that you would usually need to get from other vendors, like sales, service, marketing, business intelligence, integration, lots of them, and having them all under one umbrella. But of course, the reality is it's not as simple as that because these products are all from very different vendors. They're not on one platform. You need to integrate them with connectors. You need custom integrations into your own back-end systems using MuleSoft or something like that. So the days of when, we were running an org, and this is what Salesforce are promoting, right? They're promoting Salesforce as the front end, customer 360. So, and I mean, another thing to say is when we were how old was the org that you were working in?
Oh, it was brand new. It was literally,
yeah.
I mean, obviously it's 10 years old now, but when I joined, it was maybe 1.5 years old.
Yeah.
Really, really simple, not much data, not much technical debt. Probably contributed to some of that technical debt. But it was, it wasn't, I didn't have to go in and sort of unpick really complex automations.
Yeah.
So I was learning from a really simple background.
Simple,
it got more complicated as we grew it, which was exciting. But I think, and I've seen it now with junior admins jumping into an org that's really complicated. Where do you start? How do you learn from such customization, such complexity? So I think it is definitely more difficult. And that's probably a conversation around where are the entry-level roles now? Is it in consulting where there is potentially a platform to grow with different, more simple customers, greenfield implementations? I don't know. Or is it with the bigger companies who have Salesforce, have a really strong tech team where you can grow and learn from other people within that space? But I think it's definitely difficult now to get your foot in the door and find it simple or know where to go next.
Yeah, we've talked about it a lot on the site and on the podcast as well about entry-level roles and how they have disappeared. But, if we just take that example, we're 10 years on now. So my org was also fresh. So I was the first, they got rid of the expensive consultant, brought on me, who was a relatively cheap resource. And I wasn't a junior. I was just Salesforce admin for running the org internally. But, not a lot of data. But if you fast forward to now, that same org has probably got, it has got 10 years of data, probably more users running in it, probably loads of code, which isn't commented properly, loads of flows, So you bring in an entry level, or an admin like me who was, fairly entry level, would have no idea where to start and would probably be doing, messing things up even worse. You would need someone way more senior who has dealt with this kind of stuff before to fix it.
100%. And I think that's where the teams now required to maintain, manage, and develop the Salesforce solution need to be a lot more structured and they need to be a lot more full. You can't just have one admin who's learning on the job. You do need a BA. You do probably need some oversight in terms of a project manager, a project owner, someone with a bit of strategy. You do need the technical side of things, the admins who are doing user support and maybe picking up some tickets, some of the simpler stuff. But you might need a solution architect. You might need someone who's overseeing the platform as well. It depends how big the solution is or even where you want it to go as well. I think a lot of customers have really ambitious roadmaps now. And as they should, it's obviously where the world is going. Everything is moving towards a more tech space. But it's not just turning it on anymore and running it.
Yeah. And we were speaking about this before, but there's been an article written by a guy called Nick on our website called Do Salesforce Admins Have Too Much on Their Plate? And if you think about the admin from 10 years ago who wore those different hats, project management, user requirements, even if they're really experienced and really good, they could have probably managed it. But now with the orgs getting more complex and not only doing BAU maintenance stuff, but evolving the system as well, looking into AI, looking into data cloud, it's probably not possible. So you would probably need, for that 120 user org, I don't know what people recommend. They used to be like...
They used to have it, didn't they? I
There
can't
used to be a
remember.
table somewhere
I
on the
remember that
website.
table,
But actually, do you know what? I remember what it was because I looked up. For 120 user org, it was one senior and one junior admin. Because I was thinking, maybe I could hire someone to help me out. But that kind of feels more right. You've got junior admin executing a lot of stuff, learning from the senior, and the senior doing more strategy
based.
Speaking with the business, aligning Salesforce org strategy to the business strategy.
But then even if you've got your senior and your junior admin, if you want to go and do something wildly different, like, okay, pick an AI pilot, that is a lot for two people to go off and do. I mean, turning on features in Service Cloud and adding new features to your existing license that you've already got and just adding on, that's probably a bit more manageable. But spinning up a whole new piece of tech and working out how to do it, working out how to pilot it with the business, then doing all the change management, then feeding back and saying, is it working, tweaking? That's starting to get a little bit less manageable, I think.
Yeah. So, sales was getting very complicated, orgs over 10 years old, technical debt. And so talk to us a bit more about the strategy piece, because I think this is, when I was hired as an admin, I don't know if the word strategy was in the job description.
No.
But now Salesforce is, let's be honest, a very expensive bit of kit that you want to ensure you're getting ROI out of.
100%.
So how should Salesforce professionals think about their role in the strategy of the business and the org?
And I think this is a role in its own right. And I think companies who are using product owners...
Give us a quick overview of what a product owner is.
So a product owner works with the business to understand the business objectives. And then they break that down into how we can map those business objectives to the tech, understand what that roadmap would look like. When are we going to start adding incremental value? How can we break down the delivery of that technology? And then they work out what resources are required and how you can track OKRs, KPIs, once that tech has been implemented. And so they're constantly looking at what is the next step? How can I deliver it? Who do I need to deliver it? And then if something changes quickly within the organization, okay, how can I reprioritize? So that person or people even play a really important role in the delivery of solutions that meet business requirements, but at a much more macro level way, I think. Yep. I think when you're dealing with potentially a business unit, customer service, for example, and you're working out requirements and everything like that, and you're going to deliver a solution, that's brilliant. But okay, what does the whole picture look like? How are you going to change Service Cloud into Service Cloud with AI? And then how can you innovate on top of that? That's where a product owner role comes in. And it is a specialist skill set, I think. Mm-hmm.
And you think it's almost a requirement for Salesforce orgs, or at least someone who has those
Yeah, I do.
skills.
It doesn't necessarily need to be a full-time role. If you have ambitious targets or, with Salesforce and you want to grow it to this multi-cloud, multi-org solution, then I think it is a full-time role. But I think it's really important because if no one's steering the ship, how do you know where to go next? And then if there is big business changes, someone needs to be able to bridge the gap between the business and the tech teams. And I think that role is really important.
Yeah. It's quite interesting, actually, because the reason I asked you to explain it is because I don't think a lot of people do know what one is. I mean, I barely knew until a few years ago where I saw someone who had the role and I was like, what is that? But I don't think Salesforce actually speak about that role in their Trailhead ecosystem of career. Do you know what I mean? There's no cert aligned.
No, there isn't. And I think product owner as a role, it's more the delivery of novel products or building it from scratch for a company, for a customer. It's working in a sort of a really agile way to deliver a product that you can ideate and iterate really quickly. And I suppose that role hasn't existed within Salesforce or the Salesforce world because you've got your product and you know how to implement it into a business. But to everything together now, it requires that sort of overarching strategy. Maybe product owner isn't the terminology that you can use or is going to be used within the ecosystem, but it is that person who has the vision and is kind of like stitching it all together.
Yeah, I think it is the term that people use.
Yeah.
Because you see a lot of them around product. I mean, we've just released our salary survey today, actually.
Yes, I want to look at that.
And yeah, see if we're being paid fairly.
Yeah.
And product owner a lot of people have that role.
Okay, great. So it's, so I think it's being more recognized within the space that it is a requirement.
Yeah.
But again, it's going back to that, okay, how do you hire that? If you've got a company with deep pockets, with, again, an ambitious vision for the sales force, then that kind of strategic role is being hired. But if you don't, or you don't necessarily need that person full time, how do you bring in that skill set? I think that's probably quite interesting.
So there's a couple of other kind of issues before we go on to the next section, which is solutions. And we've kind of talked about this already, but technical debt is a big one. We dedicated an entire podcast with Matt Bradley Roberts, who was a technical architect from Salesforce. So he was saying, he works in the professional services arm of Salesforce. He's doing a lot of standardization, so bringing people back to standard Salesforce instead of,
custom.
Yeah, exactly. But when we were speaking before, you said technical debt is causing quite a lot of issues in your own roadmap as well.
Yeah, it does. I mean, and sometimes it's you've got the core the classic technical debt that you do see.
What is some classic technical debt?
Well, so even things like something super simple. Profiles, roles, and permissions have been set up in such a convoluted way that actually it's almost impossible to maintain it. You really would like to go in and just start from scratch. Or even a business unit has been brought onto the solution, and actually it's been brought on in a very separate way to what was implemented before. And actually you could have kept them very simple. So different record types, different page layouts, simple things like that, which actually, record types are then being used in flows to build automation, but in very similar ways. But you've had two different processes off the back of it. So to be able to build on top of that and to be able to execute your roadmap, you almost want to sort of align some of these processes, some of these problems, and fix some of this technical debt. But people want you to move forward instead of looking back. There's nothing, you're not going to get, but it doesn't sound sexy to go, I'm going to go in and redo all of our profiles and roles. But I think it's really important. And I think sometimes pausing and spending time fixing the foundations and getting the foundations really right will allow you to move much quicker when you bring on new technology. Technical debt, it's not sexy, but it's definitely something that I think is important to look back and fix. Yeah. Especially if it is being a blocker to moving forward. There's been a few examples in the company I'm working for now where we want to do things for the 2 or 3 different business units across Europe, but they're separated on Salesforce. So you'd either have to do it 3 times or you'd have to fix a problem. So it's just being a blocker.
Yeah, no, that is unfortunate. Yeah, I mean, another thing I think is Salesforce has evolved so much as a platform. We've gone from like classic to lightning to workflows to process build to flow. So, and I think it was, ultimately the right decision because flows are so much more powerful than anything that came before it. But that has created technical debt in itself. Now 100%. You've got to replace all your process builders.
Yeah, exactly. And we did a project at the end of last year to try and start doing that. But again, it's just going back and moving things around. It doesn't on the outside look like progress to the rest of the company, but it's something that's really important to go and do. I don't know whether we've done all our processes, but I know we've moved a lot into flows anyway. But again, and then it's also a new skill set. So we've got our admins. We're saying, okay, we need to move our process builders into flows, and they've got to now learn that new skill. So it's interesting, but that's the nature of technology. It evolves, it changes.
Yeah. And one more thing before we go into the next section, and you can tell us how to fix all of these issues.
Don't. Too much pressure.
This might be a bit of a controversial topic, but we love those kind of topics. And it's kind of like, there's a lot of talk at the moment about like bad Salesforce partners and implementations that have been implemented by, perhaps people that haven't been doing it. Or perhaps professionals that maybe didn't know enough and shouldn't have been implementing it. And, that is a potentially controversial thing to say, but it might be potentially not completely the fault of the individuals, because as we're discussing, Salesforce used to be relatively simple.
Yes.
I thought I was running a consultancy by accident in 2016. I got promoted.
You took the accidental admin way too far.
It was a big accident. And, I thought it was simple, but I was like, I know Salesforce. I've been doing it for, 4 years at that point, 3 years. And and I knew it technically. I knew about business process a little bit, so I was like, yeah, this is fine. But actually, I think some of the implementations were just, above our head, really. But we took them on because we wanted the business.
Yeah,
so.
it's consultancy, isn't it? You do want the business, and I think Salesforce has allowed people who, on paper, has no business being in tech to be in tech, and that's brilliant. I would never have worked in tech if it wasn't for Salesforce, and I'm so glad that I've had the opportunity to do so because it's an amazing career. But it has allowed cowboys or girls to go wild in these orgs, and I think you probably have that anywhere, though, in any business, in any technology. But yeah, bad practices, bad partners, bad projects. It's a normal part of life, but I think where the tool is so customizable so easily, it's led to a world now where we're starting to expect so much from the system that has tech debt and is really hard to unpick it to be able to move forward. I think it's a difficult world to try and navigate because you've got your perm teams, you've got your contractors, you've got your consultants. You're trying to piece them all together to deliver something exceptional, which you have real people using, expecting to deliver a really good customer service. And the solutions are brilliant if you get them right, but they can be quite damaging and almost slow people down if you get them wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah,
no, it's a really interesting point because I agree. Salesforce has launched the careers of loads of people who are, in perhaps, normal-ish career routes that weren't as well paid as tech. But you obviously need the support system in place. And Salesforce is so easy to customize. It's not like, I don't know, you become a junior Java developer and suddenly you can cause all this damage because you wouldn't be able to code.
You can't. Yeah, exactly. And I think in Salesforce, you can do that. You can work things out and explore things. And even, so for example, when I started working as an admin in my first, I didn't know what change set was. I didn't even know what a sandbox was. I did everything into production. I was on my own. So I was just working it out. And you wouldn't get away with that if you were working in a formalized tech environment because you learn. It was really only when I went to work in a consultancy that I was like, oh my gosh, what have I been doing? And yeah, it's basically launched the careers of people who have had the ability to do things that they shouldn't been allowed to do. But I think it is getting a bit more structured. And I think people are expecting a lot more
100%.
from the delivery. And if things, delivering really large scale transformations is really, really complicated. And when partners, when contractors, when perm team cause a problem to operations, the tech is the first person that people blame. So yeah, the accountability is definitely there now, I think. Or getting there now.
I just thought of a funny story when I was an admin. So I wanted to set up this CTI connector between like the actual physical phone and Salesforce. So I downloaded it, I installed it in my sandbox on my computer, tested it, it worked great. And I went to the customer service manager. I was like, yeah, it's all ready to roll out
brilliant.
Now. And he was just like, I want this thoroughly tested with everyone working sandboxes. And I can't remember what happened after that, but I just remember getting annoyed. I was like, what is he talking about?
Works.
I was like, it works in mine. Just let me roll it out.
Did you test it?
I think I gave up. I was like, no,
it's too much. On to the next thing. But actually, that's an interesting point as well, because there's a meticulous nature to testing. And when you're an admin or when you're someone trying to do it all and you get to the point in the process, you're like, oh, God, I don't enjoy that bit.
Yeah.
Then that's where
you're not almost the person who's done something. You need
someone else to do it. Yeah. And then also, I suppose the other side of the coin is where things have gotten so custom. This is a good example. We've just put in field service, and there's a lot of custom work there, but there's a lot of different processes that require lots of actual data, and the processes feed off the data. So when you're testing in your sandbox, unless you've got a full production data set, you can't test things thoroughly. So either things are ending up in production that hasn't been tested properly, or the admins or the testers are spending ages creating the data. We didn't have seeding at this point. We've got it now. It's a great tool. But yeah, there are solutions. There's efficiencies that need to be implemented to be able to do things properly. And it's another thing is if a customer or a company doesn't have everything that's needed to do the full end-to-end process correctly, then steps are missed.
Yeah, definitely. So I think as we kind of move on to the last section about how we maybe fix some of these issues, I I think you're right. Things for quite a few years now, people have been putting in frameworks such as DevOps. DevOps
Yes.
didn't used to be a thing when we started. It was in the general tech world, I think.
No, we just did it straight into production.
Yeah, exactly.
It was fine.
But then I think it's as kind of Salesforce got bigger and people started talking about this stuff more at community events, on their blogs, stuff like that. It became normalized what the right thing to do was, such as testing in sandboxes. I mean, now people make memes about, how bad that is. So everyone knows that. So it is getting a lot better. But there's a kind of broad question. How do you think Salesforce professionals need to kind of change their mindset to cope with this much more complex world of Salesforce?
I think we need to provide a different service offering to end users. We have a great structure at the moment for big projects. The consultancies go in, they gather all the requirements, they spin up a big commercial contract, statement of work, T&M fix, whatever. They go in and they onboard the team and they start delivering. Anything that changes throughout that cycle, change requests, new commercial conversations, budget, scope creep, the standard things you see with projects, they all happen. But that's fine when you're delivering a very concise piece of work. But then that project team leaves and you're left with a solution that, okay, it might be great, but how do you develop it? How do you manage it? How do you move on? So you've just had Service Cloud implemented. Maybe you haven't onboarded all of the features. Fine. How do you develop that solution if you don't have the budget or the strategy to do so? And then how do you, when AI suddenly becomes the next big thing, incorporate that into a roadmap where you don't already have a strategy? So I think as professionals, we should be providing a different type of service to customers, to Salesforce customers. And it's a lot more holistic and it's the full end-to-end. And instead of doing big peaks of projects, we are providing a more permanent team so that we can deliver incremental value over a much longer period of time. And it's almost like a hybrid of project and managed service. And that is what I'm hoping to do in the future.
Yeah,
in not too distant future.
I mean, I'm sure a lot of people can relate to that because when I was running the consultancy, we used to have a lot of people who no one had worked on their Salesforce org for a year, or maybe not years, but maybe a year. They had a consultant that came in a year ago, did some bits, left.
No handover.
No, and then there was a gap of a year.
Yeah.
And everyone gets really, it worked maybe for a few months, few weeks.
Yeah.
Then it starts to deteriorate, and then they get someone else in, and you've got to clean up everything that's gone wrong. Yeah, fix everything for the future. So, I mean, maybe that is not made clear by Salesforce enough when they sell the solution, that this isn't just some
Salesforce make it clear.
Yeah, but some customers were shocked, that they even. I remember speaking to some that Salesforce passed over, that shocked there was even an implementation. So the call was so angry because they were asking us, how much it cost, and we were giving them.
It's expensive though as well. I mean, consultancy partnership implementation. You are paying for a very good skill set. There's no getting away from that. But there have been bad practices. There have been bad partners. There have been obviously bad projects, and it's going back to that peaks of value realization, and then okay, well, what do we do next? I think another thing that's really interesting that's missed is the whole change management piece. So again, you've got your brand new Salesforce org, or even you've got an org that hasn't been touched in ages. Consulting team comes in, they work it all out, they fix a load of problems, they add a load of new features, and then there's no change management. So it doesn't integrate properly with the business. There's no way to track that it's working. And you're just in the same position again. I think if you had no problems with budget, then maybe you would hire a perm team to manage a really good tech team internally. But you need a lot of skill sets. You don't need them all the time. You need that flexibility to be able to onboard and offboard. And managed service providers do that to an extent, but they're missing that front end strategic piece and then the change management piece as well. I think there is a end-to-end service that can be provided that allows the pros of all of the other ways of delivering that service, your perm team, your contractors, your projects, your managed service. There's a way of pulling it together into one service offering.
And do you think, we discussed earlier and you kind of suggested that maybe all orgs need some sort of product owner.
Some kind of strategic oversight,
I mean, I'm sure we can kind of discount tiny orgs that aren't using it for much, but anyone that has a, medium-sized org, needs to think about this kind of stuff?
I think so. And I think when you look at the big companies that have very successful tech strategies, they all have good internal tech teams or a very strong strategic partner. But there's a lot of money there. There's a lot of budget.
Yeah.
But the role of the strategic role is really important to be able to marry the tech team internally or the partner and be able to see the vision through. But your small and medium enterprises, they don't necessarily have a tech team. They maybe have the one or two admins. They've got a partner relationship where they're being brought in because they want to onboard a new piece of functionality or they're trying to solve a business problem with technology, with Salesforce. But that ongoing incremental value realization that you get from someone whose role it is to work with the business, to work with the tech team, to understand the roadmap, to bring in the innovations that are coming with Salesforce, that's missing for a lot of companies. And then that product owner role will also feed into the change management piece, overseeing the end-to-end, feeding back whether it's working, whether you're actually realizing the value from the solution. Because I'm sure a conversation with the commercial decision makers of the business or the financial decision makers of the business would be a lot easier for tech teams if they're turning around and going, do you know what, we've implemented this solution, it's decreased average handling times by 25%, here's all the way that we can track it. And then your product owner is seeing that whole journey through and then going, okay, well, now we've got a bit more budget to go again. I think that's, for small mediums, not quite there yet. And I think that's a gap.
Yeah, it does kind of make sense because I suppose most people would probably have a team of admins maybe, or maybe just one admin, and they'll be overloaded with work. So you might get a managed services provider on board from the consultancies to support it. But then they're very much reactive.
They're very reactive.
They're not going to be speaking to this. I mean, they might be speaking to people in the business, but they can't do it as much as that admin could.
Yes.
So maybe the admin's role needs to evolve into product owner and then use the consultancy as... Use
the consultancy as your extension to your internal team. But this is why I think that the service doesn't quite exist yet.
Yeah.
This is the service.
Give us your
This
your
is my
pitch.
elevator pitch. But this is what I want to do. So I am starting a consultancy and I'm doing a lot of research at the moment because obviously I have my experiences and I'm pulling all of that together to go, do you know what? We are in a world now where the service offering isn't quite meeting the requirements of Salesforce customers. And it is because it's peaks and troughs of value realization, long commercial conversations before you can get a new project off the ground. Managed services is a really great tool, but you're right, it's reactive and it's not going to say, do you know what, there's a brand new piece of Salesforce kit or feature, and I know that you've got this business problem. I actually think this is how you're going to fix it. So unless that company has an internal product owner or a really strong strategic vision, those business problems aren't going to be fixed as quickly as they could be because you're going to have to go in, find your partner, spin up a project, gather all your requirements, work it out. So what I'm going to do is provide that end-to-end service. I'm going to have every single resource that is needed to run the end-to-end solution, product owner, scrum master, functional consultants, BAs, admins, and bring them into a customer on a more permanent basis. And you can just continually agile run our projects. And I'm going to work out how to do it in the most commercially effective way because you don't want it to be this never-ending budget, but it's a hybrid of project and managed service and being able to flexibly up and down skill or load your team based on what you need on your roadmap, which is defined by your product owner, which you can outsource to us. Yeah. Manage the end-to-end.
No, it makes sense because, I mean, if you think about the kind of classic consultancy, Salesforce consultancy, their services haven't really, I mean, I know there's a few innovative ones out there, but most of them haven't changed too much since, the past decade since we started. So,
and I think it works on some level, but again, it's going in, and these projects are expensive, and it's really hard to be able to explain to a customer that this implementation is going to cost you £300,000, but I promise you it's going to get this value. But if you had it spread out and if you were doing it incrementally, then you could realize the value, and also it's less risk to the operations. If you do a massive transformation and it's cost a load of money, and you've brought in a big team to deliver it, and you want loads of resourcing from the customer as well, there's a big risk to the operations. That tech then gets delivered and it's not quite right, but the project team have been offloaded or offboarded. There's a big risk there. So there is definitely a way now of doing it more not necessarily slowly, but more incrementally, and fixing all the cons in the delivery at the moment.
And maybe this is something, the example that I said where someone we used to deal with companies who get a consultant in, do a project, have a gap, get someone else in to fix the issues and do a bit more. Maybe companies are going to take their implementations more seriously, those that don't have consistent support, internal team, because this wave of AI is coming. And, obviously there's a lot of promise at the moment and not too much which is tangible. What is your opinion of AI in general?
We've gone from CRM to CRM plus data to CRM plus data plus AI. And I think the AI revolution is really, really exciting. And there's one part of me that's going, oh my gosh, look at all of the efficiencies that can be derived. This is going to be so exciting. This is this new world of amazing functionality. I use it in my day-to-day, ChatGPT, obviously, like who doesn't? But then there's a practical side of me that goes, oh, it's really hard to implement change into a business anyway. There are features that we're using in our core Salesforce licenses that we may not even be turned on yet. There's technical debt, which we've spoken about, but there's also a requirement to use good data that grounds the AI. So there's a whole conversation around how do we take it from this exciting new solution or this exciting new product to actually being able to use it within a business. Because if you turn it on now, chances are you're not going to have a very good outcome. You need to have good architecture. Data cloud is a big one, pulling that all together so you can really get the value of AI. So you're bringing data in from potentially lots of different sources so you can understand your customer from the whole business standpoint. But then some of the features, even the Service Cloud features, they require you to be grounded in knowledge. If you've got a knowledge base that's 10 years old that needs tidying up, you can't expect AI just to sit on top of it and just deliver good outcomes or good results. I think one of the biggest things that you ever get asked for as an admin is this data in this report isn't good. Like, I can't trust the data in this report. And you turn around to an admin and go, well, it's important that, people are putting in the data into the system properly. But now we're asking AI to sit on top of it and just miraculously come out with insights from data that a person wouldn't even trust if they were looking at it. So I think AI is really, really exciting, but I think there is a reality to implementing it properly. And the tech might not be bad with AI, but unless you've got the foundation right and the data right, you're not going to have a good outcome.
Yeah, I think it's kind of funny with everyone's been saying for like a decade plus, right? Like data is the new oil. But I don't think
I haven't heard that, but I quite like. Yeah, no,
quite a good saying. But
yeah.
Like even myself though, I haven't been taking it that seriously. I'm just like, yeah, I know data's important, but
whatever.
Yeah. And I'm sure a lot of other companies have that as well, because unless you are massive using kind of BI analytics tools, like as long as the data is mostly okay, we'll just leave it. But now it's like, no, seriously, you need to get your data in order.
Because we've just done a pilot at a ways at the company I'm doing some work for now, and it's gone well.
And this is a pilot of a Salesforce product.
Yeah, this was a pilot of AI in Service Cloud. So we've done case classification, work summaries, wrap up. We've implemented into a pilot some of the sort of the newer AI features on Service Cloud. And we built a knowledge base from scratch to be able to do that. There wasn't knowledge in the system before. So we're getting good results because our knowledge base has been developed for this pilot. But the other side of the coin is we've got I think there was like 750,000 cases a year. Wow. And part of the AI features is case classification. And they're looking through old cases and they're looking through the content of the new case to decide what the type and subtype is going to be. And we started putting this into the pilot and we're like, well, this is coming out with some really weird results. And then we asked the service teams, they said, oh, yes, well, we think that only 40% of the previous cases have been classified correctly. So the data, something that's so simple in that one field, it's skewed everything. So I don't want to be disheartened with it, because I was listening to a conversation at Salesforce Tower the other day, and a customer had done 50 AI pilots and only one of them had succeeded.
Wow. So
we're not expecting this to work straight away, but I think just because it doesn't mean that it's not going to. We just got to keep trying and keep iterating the data and iterating the models and the prompts. But it's really new, and I don't think a lot of people, maybe there are some really, really good experts out there, but the likes of me trying this, I'm just learning. And I think it's exciting, but let's not get disheartened.
I think part of the problem is ChatGPT was when it was released, it was so amazing.
So amazing.
Okay, it wasn't perfect, hallucinations, etc., but it did a pretty good job at most things.
Yeah, so I think our expectations were high.
Yeah, exactly. And then Salesforce released something like, well, this is going to work straight away. But, it's very different. Like, I don't know if you know GitHub Copilot. Like, that's been amazing for developers. But it's kind of like plug and play, right? You install it and now you've got this thing that can generate code. I think that's how it works. But with Salesforce, there are so many variables. It's huge implementation. So it's kind of to be expected it's not going to work in this first wave.
100%.
But we've got agents coming, which is interesting.
That's exciting. I'm excited. I think there's some sneak peeks of what's happening at Dreamforce kind of trickling through the ecosystem.
Yeah.
But again, it's a new piece of technology, and it's where does that fit in your roadmap? And what do you need to be able to deliver it properly? All of this amazing AI solutions, this products, comes from data being stored, collected, maintained in the right way. And I think there's a lot of companies who haven't even got the CRM piece right, and they're still working on that, and then they're expecting AI just to work. So yeah, going back to that piece we were talking about earlier on technical debt or bad data, there's nothing wrong with saying, okay, there's some things that I can do now, but really for us to be able to deliver this in the future, I need to go back and I need to fix some stuff.
I think I've got a quote from you in our pre-chat. There's no room for technical debt in the world of AI.
No, I don't think there is, though. I think technical debt or bad data, I mean, you see, if you put a prompt wrong into ChatGPT, what comes back and you're like, I can't use that.
Yeah.
Like and then you're asking agents to trust sort of generative results that is coming from your org, from your knowledge base, from externally, and they're not getting the results they see, so they're not going to trust it. So I think it's important to take it slow. It's important to look back. It's important to get your data right. Trial it. Don't stop the pilots, because I think it's the only way to learn. But I think there is definitely something about getting you're not going to get an admin in the same way that we were, going into a simple org and start messing around and it's going to work. This is a bit more dangerous to get wrong. So, yeah.
100%. And just before we sign off today, we've kind of steered clear of rowing for the whole
We did
session.
very well.
But give us your
rowing.
Usually
If I run out of things to say, I'll just bring it back to rowing. So,
give us the analogy for rowing and progressing a Salesforce org.
So this is my whole thing with what I'm going to do with Cosimo Consulting. This idea that at the moment, the way that Salesforce is delivered is big peaks of value with projects that do sometimes have the ability to be flexible within your requirements, but mostly it's a pretty fixed scope. And then you've got a gap for ages, and you have to spin up the projects again, and you have to get more budget, and you maybe have an admin working on maintaining the system, or a managed service just keeping the lights on and doing some little feature enablements or enhancements. But when I think of my rows, I think of 3,000 miles, and there's no way to get from A to B in one big jump. And if I started doing big days of incremental value and then really slow days and big days again, it would feel really disjointed, I'd feel like I was stagnating in the short period. So it's breaking it down into chunks. It's doing consistent things every single day and adding incremental value. And then suddenly you're at the end and you can look back and go, gosh, I've achieved so much more than I would have if I just went like this, or even if I just tried to do the whole thing in one go. So the analogy is, you need to break it down. You need to be consistent. You need to be moving forward all the time. And big peaks actually probably slow you down long term. So that's the analogy.
Great. Salesforce advice from a 2-times world record rowing holder. Fantastic.
Thank you, Ben.
Thank you so much, Jess. Cheers.
Thank you.